I want to talk about a rather disappointing move that the Democratic Party has made, as since this election and our loss, the party has been thinking on which direction they want to move pretty much, right? Do we want to lean more economically populist? Do we want to lean more into social issues? Do we lean more to the right? And a lot of this came down to, okay, there was consensus around we at least need to change the guard, right? Biden came in 2020 and promised he would be a transitional president, right? That he would serve one term and he would stand to pass the torch to the fresh young voices. And while he ended up staying in power a bit too long, not wanting to give it up the way that he had originally promised, he ended up doing exactly that and allowing a younger voice in Kamala Harris to elevate to power. And the thought after the election was, even though she didn't lose, this is definitely the direction we need to head. Whether we decide to lean more right or left on policy, we need to get rid of like the old white guy as the face of the party, the old man, right? Like we need younger, fresher voices. And it seemed in a lot of the committee picks we've been making that is the direction that the Democratic Party indeed had been heading, where we've seen younger and more progressive members of the House usurping the veteran members and older members, ranking members for these ranking positions, and like the energy committees and a bunch of different ones that signaled, hey, we are changing the guard, we're passing the torch to these younger voices, and it signaled we're more willing to lean left into these more progressive economic populist policies, right? That is until the big dog came up, which is the oversight committee. This is kind of the head of the snake, so to speak, for policy and positioning and this kind of stuff in the House, these conversations. And the selection for the ranking member was going to be between AOC and Gerry Connolly. Gerry Connolly is kind of this older, he represents the old guard, middle left, Biden-esque wing of the Democratic Party, where there was a lot of support, especially on the ground, for AOC. On the ground, there's a lot of momentum for AOC to take this position. It would be like the last one to signify, yes, we're passing the guard to younger voices. I mean, she's like 30s, right? He's like 70s. That is until the vote came in. It went to the subcommittee first, and Gerry Connolly wins. This subcommittee's job pretty much is to recommend, so to speak, a candidate. They hold a vote. Typically, the big caucus, the whole caucus in the House, goes with the suggestion, but there are times that they break from it. In that vote, Gerry Connolly wins, but AOC allies come out and say, hey, don't worry, this wasn't the best venue for AOC. There's a lot of ranking members, veteran members, who obviously are going to side with Gerry Connolly on this. Once it goes to the full vote, she's going to have a lot more allies. This is where she has the chance to win. Well, that vote came in, and it turns out that she lost, which is really disappointing because, again, this was kind of like the biggest committee roll up for it, and AOC is like the face of both that economic populist side of the party and the fresh young face movement on the Democratic side that also has a lot of momentum. And I want to start by saying now, Gerry Connolly doesn't have terrible politics, right? He honestly has good politics somewhat. I mean, he is like a Middle East hawk. He is somewhat beholden to corporate interests still. Like, he's not perfect, right? He represents, again, like that old guard, middle left Biden type Democrat. But he has good enough politics that I could see if the party does end up going in this more lean left, populist, progressive direction. I don't see him being a hindrance to that, so to speak. But I also don't see him being the best communicator for those policies. Whereas AOC has great politics and is a great communicator, right? And again, already kind of has this momentum, this brand behind her to where she could really signify like, yes, we're leaning into worker first. Like AOC, that's her entire brand. Like, we care about the workers. We care about your wages. We care about these tabletop issues. We care about fighting corporations. And these are, again, the messages that Democrats perform the best on in this election. So like, why wouldn't we lean into that with our oversight committee? Whereas AOC, like, and I think part of it, and this is what scares me, is it's Democrats again falling victim to the usual curse of, we're scared to be labeled as radical, or we're scared of the response from the right, where the right will be like, oh, the Democrats, look, they are socialists because they elected AOC, a socialist, radical leftist. And I think it's time that like Democrats stop fearing this, because honestly, most people don't care about this. And most people don't buy into this kind of dumbass like shit. Sorry, excuse my language, but most people don't buy into the nonsense, right? The hype about socialism, and they want to do socialism. And I think it's like, that's for terminally online people like on X who are going to say it no matter what the left does. So it's like, who cares, right? I think that they should elect these people and lean into it because, again, they're playing a good game in that they're labeling what the Democrats need to do as radical, which scares the Democrats from doing it, but just bite the bullet, go ahead, and then start calling them on their shit. When they say, hey, you're a socialist, start in these debates and these conferences, go on Fox News, say, hey, define socialism, tell me my socialist policy. If you can't, then admit that you're lying, because you can't. You can't look at AOC and you can't be like, here's her socialist. Because people are always saying, it's funny, like this is the thing. Because I've done this before, right? You say AOC socialist, okay, define socialism, name the socialist policy. They're just like, socialism is when like you mooch off the rich, and which isn't socialism. And the socialist AOC policy is universal healthcare, which isn't socialist. We're like one of the few developed nations that don't have universal healthcare, and most countries with universal healthcare aren't socialist. So that's like a fun fact for you. So people can't name socialist policies. They can't define socialism. So like I would start calling them on that. And then I would start saying like, hey, I want you people to know like what they're calling socialism, what they're so hard against is like, we want you to get better wages. We want you to earn more of the profits you create for the corporations. We want to prevent corporations from price gouging their products. We want you to be given health care. We don't want your rent to exceed a certain percent of your income. Like we want food and groceries to be affordable. We want all unions to have more power. Like these are the things they're calling socialism. Like we're the party of the worker, and they're the party of convincing the worker that things that benefit them aren't good for them. That's the argument. And that's why it's sad that despite leaning into this and a lot of other committees, it seemed that they looked over AOC and what could have been a very big signifier of what's to come. And I just hope that it's not, and was just kind of a misstep where, again, not a terrible pick, but they had a chance to really do something great and missed that opportunity.